Okay, that's disgusting now, don't worry about that. This thing stinks like fish. As you can see, our blood pack does absolutely work. I hope this is the only bald version of me that ever exists. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I'm your host Tyrant, and today we are finally getting to a very, very important, I would say kind of crafting episode actually. So obviously we started the channel a couple of years ago at this point, and we have been creating and testing a multitude of different things weekly, right? And it's something that obviously I love doing, it's very fun, and you guys, I hope you guys enjoy it, right? But there's always been something that I have wanted to do, but never really had not only kind of like the spare cash for the channel to actually be able to do it, but also it's just not something that is readily available in my country. And that is ballistic gel testing. Now, this is something that I bet a bunch of you guys have seen for a whole bunch of different YouTubers, predominantly a lot of the gun tubers as well. But the problem is, the company that makes all of those sorts of, ballistic parts that you can test and shoot and all that sort of stuff, it just doesn't exist pretty much in a lot of other places around the world, and it's really difficult and kind of expensive to make this sort of ballistic gel. But I have finally decided it is time to delve down this rabbit hole and create a brand new testing medium, specifically because I feel like I've run into I'm not gonna say the limitations, that's not the right word, but I've run into a point where I do want to create bigger tests for specific things, and I think this is a fantastic way to kind of create a good visual testing medium for you guys that I think that you will enjoy and that I will enjoy as well, actually obviously testing it, right? So my plan for today's episode is, the first thing I need to do is create the ballistic gel itself. I'm just going to create a standard block, very simple to make, just so I can get my mixture right. Now this is a really important step because a lot of people will immediately rush to the comments and say, just go and use this product or that product or blah, blah, blah. Problem is, again, that's a very, shall I say, American focused kind of look at this thing. In a lot of other countries, a lot of these brands don't exist. A lot of these, prices, for example, of how much it costs per, I'm going to use the American metric here, freedom units per gallon, right, is just not the same, right? So in my country, it is a lot more expensive. It's also a lot, I have to use different brands and kind of essentially just troubleshoot what will actually work and give reasonably effective results. Now, before we continue, I think it's also worth mentioning that yes, I am fully aware that ballistic gel is not a good one-to-one analog for flesh, especially against melee weapons, right? But it is fun to do. A lot of people enjoy it. I think I'll enjoy it. So I think it is a fair and valid test to do. Either way, we're doing it. That's essentially what I'm getting at. So with that out of the way, let's get started. The first task we need to set about doing is creating a block of ballistic gel. Now, I already have done a little bit of kind of prototyping with this. I made specifically for members only, behind the scenes look at what I've already kind of come up with, and it was a little bit too soft. It wasn't as firm as I wanted. So what I'm going to be doing for my next mixture is actually tweaking it a little bit more to make it far more firm and dense. We'll go out there, we'll shoot some arrows at it, we'll hit it with some swords, we'll see how it feels, kind of a testing medium, its resistance, all that sort of stuff. Then we will come back and we will finally make a ballistic head. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, and the costs are quite substantial. Here is our giant tub of gelatin. So this is what we're going to be testing first, just to make sure that our mix is correct. It should be the right ratios, all that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do is, haven't even taken it out obviously, fire a couple of arrows, hit it with a couple of things, and we'll see how it looks. This layer here looks a little bit terrible because this was the main pour that I did, and then this one here was spillage and like a whole bunch of extra crap that I essentially just chucked in and then poured a separate layer on just to see if it would still kind of work. Recycling essentially, and it seems it has worked. I'll try and get a nice close-up for you guys. So this here is our gelatin. It has a very interesting texture, I must admit. Let's fire, oh, so this second layer is delaminating. Well, I better stop fucking with it and shoot it. It seems that when I do pours, I am gonna probably have to do them all in one pour, because if I don't, it might not actually adhere properly. So I've brought just a bunch of random arrowheads and I'm just gonna start firing away, and hopefully we can get some good slow-mo, and hopefully we get some good results. So let's do it. Yes, very gross. Entry point, exit point, and a nice big line to denote how it got there. All right, let's try something. Let's try something a little bit of a curveball. This one here is more of a hunting arrow. We'll see what that does to it. Damn. As you can see, I don't know if we'll be able to see on camera, but there are cut marks, slice marks all along here. I'm trying not to hit too low, because if I hit too low, I'm gonna break the arrow instantly. I think this arrow did it, but you can see what it did was take a huge filleting slice, and that was just from a regular broadhead, I think. Or maybe it was one, no, I think it was. Oop, crap. Okay, that's disgusting now, don't worry about that. I was gonna show it to you, but don't worry. Interesting, at least we're getting good results though. These hunting heads, holy crap. Like the gash that you get from these is insane. But this is kind of what I wanted to test. I wanted to make sure that this is kind of the right mixture. Now the biggest variable that I'm dealing with here is obviously I've never used real ballistic gel, right? I'm not necessarily sure exactly how it's supposed to feel and behave with certain things, right? So I'm kind of making it up as I go. I think this is pretty correct. We're getting good streaks from obviously the penetration from the arrows, which means I think it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So with that out of the way, let's fire a couple more at it. Maybe hit it with a sword, and then we need to go work on our next project. So you can see this is kind of what the hunting heads have done. Let's take this big bit off. And as we can see, this is the kind of the two layers. I think the bubbles created a bit too much of a barrier for it to actually stay on. So that's good to know for the next time, honestly. But in terms of the actual solid block, it's performed and it showed me exactly what we want. We're able to see how far things are penetrating. We're able to see not only how they're penetrating, basically all the data you would want from this sort of test medium, which means that we are now indeed ready to get up to the ballistic head itself. Now I should mention, I have tried this before and I did try it with a different type of mix that was a lot more expensive per, you know, per gram or whatever it was, and it was clear. This was the cheaper stuff that I found, and this cheaper stuff has this kind of piss color, essentially. So there's not really much I can do about that. It is what it is, I guess. I'm gonna hit this with a couple of swords really quickly because I want to. That was an interesting kind of sensation, I must say. Did you know that 69% of you are not subscribed? Nice. But today, I would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing. As much as I don't want to move from the 69 number, I would like if you guys subscribed, because that would make my day. I hope you guys are enjoying the episode. Let's get back to it. So now that we know that our ballistic mixture is right, it is time to make a ballistic head. And there's a lot of steps here, right? But it's one of those things where if you have experience in this sort of, you know, field, which I do, it's not too difficult. There's just a lot to go through, and it's kind of expensive as well. So the first thing that I needed to do was get a 3D model of a head. And I decided it would be a good idea to use my own head. So a couple of years back, I actually made a 3D model of my own head, and I've had it sitting there for ages at this point, and I thought it would be a good idea to use that. A little bit of self-deprecating humor. There's a little bit of funniness to us smashing the ballistic heads that are obviously modeled after my own. First thing I needed to do was actually remove the hair from the model, because obviously when I modeled it, I have hair, of course. So sculpting a bald head is actually a lot more difficult than one might first assume. They're not perfectly round, obviously, because that would be ridiculous. So it's actually kind of harder than I ever thought or care to know to actually sculpt a bald head. But then after I did that, I sent it to the 3D printer and took about a day to print. Alas, poor me. You know, when you have those ideas, right? You think to yourself, this will be good. People will like this. This will be funny. And then when you do it, you go, yeah, I don't think that was a good idea, actually. I'm feeling a little bit like that. I can't lie. So this here is obviously a 1-to-1 of my head. Now, I should mention this first and foremost. I hope that I never go bald. I truly, I hope, I pray amongst these things. So being confronted with this bald head right here is not something I'm enjoying, in all honesty. But there's also something strange about it. Because it's a 1-to-1, that's what makes this kind of a very unusual experience. Like, this isn't like, you know, having like a 600-foot statue put up, or like a tiny little, you know, action figure or something. When it's 1-to-1, it's just weird. Yeah, I thought I should mention how I'm feeling about this particular circumstance. The next thing that we need to do was actually make the mold of the head itself. This was a little bit more tricky than I originally had planned, because you can actually buy specific silicons that are used for casting body parts and people and things like that. It's called life casting. However, it was kind of a lot more expensive than just my regular silicon that I use to make you know, regular molds. So I just decided to buy extra of the regular silicon that I use. Now, the biggest difference between these two different types of silicon for casting is the viscosity, meaning obviously with the life casting ones, it's a little bit thicker, which means that when you actually apply it to something, it doesn't, you know, kind of drop off and drip and all that sort of stuff. So when I actually applied the silicon to the head, it was kind of a race against time to kind of get it into all the little areas, stop it from, you know, dripping and going everywhere, at the same time capturing all of those details and making sure that the actual mold itself was thick enough and there was no gaps or holes. So I kind of used the wrong silicon on purpose, which made this a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. But funnily enough, by the end of it, I didn't use as much silicon as I thought I would. I didn't have as much wastage as I thought I would. So I do think that this was actually a little bit more cost effective than just buying the proper silicon for this type of application. But after the mold of the head is how I want it, I don't think there's any gaps. I think it's thick enough. I think it'll be strong enough. I now need to make a rigid mold around the silicon that when we actually go to cast it later, it will make sure that the silicon stays in the right shape. So what I'm going to be using is some plaster, I believe plaster cloth it's called. It's really easy to use, super cheap. All you do is cut all the cloth to the, you know, the sizes and pieces you need, dip it in some water, apply it to the silicon and let it dry. It'll create a nice rigid mold that will be able to hold the silicon, but at the same time, it's not very difficult to either fix or maintain. The complexity of this particular piece is obviously that we want to make sure that we have a 2-part mold for the plaster, which means that you are going to have to create a gap. I used some kind of like, you know, cling film essentially on one layer of the plaster, and then I, you know, plastered over it, and then when it dries, I can remove the cling film, and it means that the two halves aren't actually permanently joined, they can come apart. So with the plaster dry and obviously taken off the silicon head, it's now time to take the head out of the mold itself. What I'm going to do is cut a zigzag pattern into the back of the head. That'll be where the seam is. This will also allow us enough room to actually, you know, pull the 3D printed head out. And that is essentially how you create a mold of a head. But of course, I used a 3D printed model for the head, not necessarily a live casting, meaning on a person. There's a couple of different steps in there that you would change up and go this way or that way. But essentially, in its broad strokes, it's very similar. Now, with that being being said, we need to create the skull now, because obviously we need to be able to put kind of the skull inside of the ballistic gel, inside of the mold. There's a lot of steps here. So I found this particular 3D model of a full 1-to-1 size skull. The first thing I said about doing was making sure that it was the correct size to actually fit into the mold of my head. So we're back in the 3D modeling. Then I sent it to my printer. Now what I did was actually, 3D printed parts and bone, very different from one another, but because we're trying to replicate it as close as possible, it's not going to be perfect, but we're trying to replicate it. It means that I did play around with the settings, and what I decided was to have no infill, because if we actually infilled the skull with lots of different patterns and designs, it'd probably be too strong and wouldn't break in the right amount of ways, while also consuming a lot of different material and being very, very expensive. So what I decided to do was make the walls the thickest point, so the walls are quite thick. I'm also using a stronger version of PLA, the PLA Tough, and then there's no infill. So we should have cavities inside the skulls that we can actually put different mediums into. Essentially, we can put brains in the skulls if we want. Now, I'm not going to know until we test it how viable these 3D printed skulls are, but for now, this is kind of the best option we have, while also being realistically feasible. Decided to print them in halves just because if anything goes wrong with the print, these are already like 8-hour prints. If I printed it all in one piece, it would take a long time, and if something goes wrong, we're going to lose the entire print. So this is just more of hedging our bets type deal. The softest part of the skull is actually going to be the seam, which the two halves join together. I just use a knife to cut that open, and then I'll put a bag of fluid in. This is just obviously our prototype skull. We don't know how well this is going to go, and I may change up what we put in the skulls actually later at some other point, but for now I'm just going to use bags of fluid, of water, and then I can join both halves of the skull. Then we have a ready-made skull to go inside of the mold. And then last but not least, we just need to obviously mix up some more of our mix, our ballistic gel mix, pour that into the mold, put our skull in, and wait for it to dry. So let's get out there, let's demold the skull and see how it looks, see if this worked at all. This should be good to go, but the first thing is obviously I have to travel out here, which takes, over an hour to get here. So I got to actually keep it cold on the trip, and this is kind of what I devised. Just a little bit of ice in a box. It's not an esky, but it's close enough. So here is my drink. I'm gonna take a drink first. Okay, here is the head. It's dripping a little bit of water because the ice has been melting. Now the truth is, this is a prototype. There's a couple of problems I already know that we're going to have with this. First and foremost, the skull is not centered exactly where I want it. So when I make another one, I need to fix that. Second of all, the mold had a couple of failures. Not necessarily failures with the mold itself, more so they were failures in my own planning. Because I was just trying to rush through things a little bit, it meant that I didn't really think things through. So the next time I do this, I will have a better process down so that I won't have as much wastage, right? Oh, okay. Originally, I was just going to finish the episode out right now and just do a full dedicated testing episode, but with YouTube being the way it is these days, I'm just going to do it in today's episode. Hopefully, the episode will do well, because this is actually a lot more effort and money than I originally had planned. But like I said, this is a prototype, and there are a couple of issues that I'm noticing off the bat. First off, just demolding it did rip one of my ears off. It was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be, which means I think, even though this is the correct mix ratio, I'm actually going to add more to it. But I think that this is just a little bit too soft for what I wanted, especially if one of the ears can rip off that easily. In terms of the skull, it actually centered itself really, really well, but I don't know if I'm going to be going with a 3D printing method in the future. I'm going to try another couple of different options that I have available, and we'll see what we see, right? Like I said, this is a prototype, so how this breaks in today's testing is important, because it means it will decide how we go in the future. But with that being said, I think that is enough talking. This thing stinks like fish. It's gross. Anyway, let's smash the thing now. So I think we'll start with some arrows. I think arrows will be an interesting thing to start with. I hope this stays. exactly here, because the moment this falls off, I'm not picking it up. I know it's hard to see because of the translucency, right? But from my point of view right here, that is my face, and it is very strange. Let's get started. 80-pound bow against ballistic head dummy. First arrow. Let's see what happens. This particular head here is a bit of a monster, moves a little bit slower. Okay. Oh, alrighty. All right, that one though, went in through the cheek, missed the neck, the spine, whatever we want to call it, and missed all the bones. So hit nothing but soft targets. All right, let's take this one out because we missed all of the bones. Nice sticky arrows, great. Actually, I might have to push it all the way through. Wow, that does not want to come out. Okay, let's try this one. That also doesn't want to come out. Okay, they're gonna stay in just for now because apparently they want to stay there. This arrow has gotten firmly embedded in the head. Like I actually can't get it out. It's embedded into the skull itself. So, I mean, bullseye. Truth is, price of the video just went up, guys. If you want to join on the Patreon to help support this content, I would truly appreciate it because these arrows aren't coming out. I feel like I should be able to get this one though, if I'm lucky. Come on. Next up, we have a sword. As you guys can see as well, it has started dripping blood. So the blood packs do work, which is good. It was a little bit difficult to hit them, it seems, but for the most part, at least there is some blood. All right, let's try something a little bit soft at first, right? That's a giant gash in the head. Did not get through the skull. Let's try a thrust right through the face. As you can see, our blood pack does absolutely work. We're losing face. Okay. Blade is once again through the skull. Let's go for a hit. All right, and for the finale, let's smash it with our Excutioner blade. Should be able to destroy the skull completely and utterly. Oh, ain't that a hoot. Okay, so interesting stuff here, guys. More interesting for me than you guys, honestly. So it seems prints were not 100%, one second, waterproof, which is what I wanted, which means that the actual skull took a shit ton of that ballistic gel into the heads, into the cavities, which is not what I wanted because I used a lot more mix than I really wanted for this skull. And it seems it must have seeped in somewhere. And because of that, I wasted so much gel on the internals of the head. That also explains why the skull wasn't cracking and breaking 100% the exact way that I thought it would. Back to the drawing board because I think it works, right? We can use this as a good testing medium, but there is a couple of kinks that I'll probably try to work out before the next ballistic head test that'll pop up in any which episode. I'm not sure. I do think that is all for today's episode. I genuinely hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that you're excited about this new testing medium. It is quite expensive, so if you want to support the channel, there'll be links down below. I genuinely would appreciate it, because this is a lot. But let me know your thoughts down below. As always, I'll see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.